You hear the bell over the diner door before you hear my voice. You see the closed forever sign somebody taped to the glass. You hear the rumble of a truck and the clink of a chain on a tow hitch. Then you hear a young woman say, "You sold the diner?" Her voice shakes like a pan on a hot burner. That young woman is my stepdaughter. My name is Martha Jo Ellison. I am 62. I am a widow. I am the woman with the key in her palm and flower on her sleeve. I look at the sign. I look at the girl who taped it and I say, "No, honey, you did, but I bought it back." A tow driver kills the engine. Silence drops like a lid over a pot. My stepdaughter stares at me. Her fiancé stares at the deed in my hand. Customers from 30 years of eggs and coffee start gathering on the sidewalk like ghosts who came home early. I turn the key. I flip the sign. Open. I need you to know how we got here. I need you to know why a quiet widow in a denim jacket and church shoes decided to fight a real estate deal big enough to swallow a whole block. I need you to know about the last breakfast I cooked for my husband, about the first time my stepdaughter called me mom, and the first time she called me a liability. I need you to hear the lies. I need you to taste the truth. I need you to sit at my counter for 1 hour and listen the way folks used to, with both hands around a warm mug and both feet on the floor, because this story is not about food. This story is about respect. And respect, in this town, is something you cook yourself. I am going to tell you everything. I am going to tell you how a piece of paper almost stole my life. I'm going to tell you how a recipe card saved it. And then, if you want, you can tell me where you are listening from, because I like to think of all the tables we share across this country, all the counters that hold people up when the world leans too hard. My name is Martha Jo. This is my voice. This is my diner. Sit down. Let me pour you coffee. Let me tell you the truth. My husband's name was Earl. Folks around Rutherford County called him Short Order King because that man could scramble eggs with one hand and flip pancakes with the other while he told a joke clean enough for the church ladies and funny enough for the truckers. Earl died on a Tuesday at 4:12 a.m. 3 springs ago. Heart. Quiet. Fast. The kind of passing that leaves a mess inside the ones left standing. I still hear the tick of the clock on the wall behind the griddle, still see the grease paper list he wrote every morning. Bacon, 2 cases. Coffee, 3 bricks. Love, unlimited. He wrote that last line to make me smile. It worked. Every time.
We ran Ellison's Diner 32 years. Some folks count years by presidents. We count it by biscuit batches and Christmas parades. We fed each other first and the town second. That was our secret. You cannot feed a county if you starve your house. Earl used to say that, then kiss my cheek and slide a plate under the heat lamp like it was a letter he had written to the world. When Earl passed, I folded the aprons. I turned off the neon. I told myself I would rest for 1 week and decide what to do. 1 week turned into 3 months of listening to a building breathe in the dark. When a place has held that much life, it does not like to be quiet. I have a stepson in Nashville. I have a stepdaughter here in town. My stepson sent flowers and a text with a broken heart emoji. My stepdaughter came in a dress that cost more than any month I ever had. She hugged me in the doorway. She smelt like perfume I cannot pronounce. She said, "Mom." That word slid warm across my chest. I was not this woman's first mother. I was not her second. But on that day, she chose me, and I let it in because a house contains many rooms, and grief opens doors you did not know you had. Her name is Leela. She is 31. She smiles with all her teeth when someone else is looking. She watches without blinking when no one is. The first talk about selling did not come from me. It came from a man with a tablet and a jaw like a brick. He stood in my dining room where teens signed the back wall with Sharpie the night before graduation, where church elders met for pie after council votes, where a trucker once paid for every plate on a snowy morning because kindness is warmer than coffee. That man looked at my booth like a hunter looks at a fence line. He said, mixed use concept, rooftop bar, condos more glass than God. He waved numbers through the air like smoke. My hand closed around Earl's ring in my pocket. I said, we are not a concept. He said, everything is a concept when you count it right. I asked him to leave. He left the card anyway. I tossed it. I swept after him. I swept twice. Grief makes you clean things that are not dirty. 2 weeks later, Leela invited me to brunch at a place with an avocado on the sign and a menu that said farm to table with the same confidence my chalkboard once said Catfish Friday. She wore sunglasses inside. She slid my water across the table with nails that could slice an apple into paper. She said, Mom, the property is hot. Inventory is low. This is the time to maximize the legacy. She said legacy like it was a coupon. She said maximize like it was mercy. I looked at the corner of the menu where the price for eggs made my throat catch. I said, legacy is not a check. She said, nobody said it is, but checks help legacies live. I did not answer. I did not know how to say I was afraid of the quiet when the lights went out. I did not know how to say the smell of hot brise is the smell of home. So I smiled and asked the server for coffee. The server said they only serve pour over after 2. I said that was fine. My hand shook so hard I pretended to read the part of the menu that explained toast like it was a new invention. Lila has a fiance named Carter. He is from a family that learned numbers before it learned names. Carter wears suits in a town where people own exactly one. He calls everybody by first name, even people old enough to be his grandparents. He shook my hand like he was shaking hands with my property line. He called me Mrs. Ellison twice, then switched to Mom to see which one opened doors faster. I watched his eyes around papers. I watched the way he looked at my walls when he came by the diner with Lila to help declutter. He called our stools vintage. He called the pie case charming. He called the parking lot wasted potential. He never called the diner what it was, a place that held people the way a good skillet holds heat. I tried to reopen alone. I came at 5 a.m. with my cardigan and my old radio and my stubborn. I unlocked the back. I clicked on the hood vent. I opened the flour bin and cried because the scoop felt like a hand I remembered. I cracked eggs. The shells snapped like brittle bones. My wrists hurt when I whisked. My knees reminded me I was not 28. I burned the first pan of bacon. I burned the second because I was staring at the crooked picture of the first dollar we ever made. I turned off the stove. I sat on a milk crate and told Earl I was sorry. I locked the door before the sun. When grief will not let you move forward, it will try to move you backward. That is how I almost sold the diner. Not because I wanted to, because the quiet scared me deeper than a bill ever did. Lila knew the fear. Lila smelled fear the way some folks smell rain. She came with coffee and sympathy and a folder I thought was insurance papers. She said, Mom, sign the application for a temporary closure permit. The city wants it. I signed where she put a tab. That tab was not a closure permit. That tab gave Carter access to my business records. That tab gave Carter the right to request documents on my behalf. That tab opened a door I did not know existed. The first time I heard the word foreclosure, I was buying napkins at the wholesale club. A man in a vest asked if I was the account holder. He said my Net 30 coffee supplier had flagged the diner for non-payment. We always paid. We never did not pay. But the statement he showed me had an address that was mine and a signature that looked like my name written by a hand in a hurry. My chest turned to ice. I drove home with paper towels in the back like a white flag. There is a lawyer in town named Mrs. Finch. She wears shoes like weapons and glasses like a judgment you deserve. She is 68 and every boy she beat in debate remembers it. I brought her a copy of the statement. I brought her the folder Leela gave me. I brought her the ring from my pocket. I said, "My husband trusted me with his place." Mrs. Finch turned the paper slow. She said, "Someone is trying to force a default by manufacturing one." She said, "No sale is final that begins with a lie." She said, "Do you have coffee?" I said, "I have coffee at the diner." We drove there in her Buick like we were heading to a funeral we planned to stop. When somebody tries to take your life with pen and paper, the answer is not always fists. Sometimes the answer is a second pen. Miss Finch sent registered letters to suppliers in the bank. She put holds on holds. She said words that made phone voices get careful. She asked me for passwords I keep in my Bible because the Lord and I both know I forget them. She clicked through email messages from addresses that looked like mine but were not. She made a list. At the top she wrote, "Who profits if you fold?" I did not want to write my stepdaughter's name on that line, but the pen in my hand wrote it for me. Pain is a kind of ink. 2 days later, I heard voices inside the diner at night. I walked across the lot soft as a cat, looked through the side window that always sticks when the weather turns wet. Inside, under the light of a phone, I saw Leela and Carter. He was pointing with the corner of a file folder. She was nodding the way you nod when you agree with something you know is wrong, but you like the way it feels. On the counter sat my recipe box. He flipped cards with fingertips that never cooked a thing. She reached for the card that says biscuit, Earl's Way, and laughed like the first sin ever told. I tried the door. It opened. I stepped in. "Looking for something?" I said, and the way their heads snapped, you would have thought guilt wears a collar and someone yanked it. "Mom, we were just stealing," I said. "Touch my recipes again and you will draw back a handful of thorns." "Mrs. Ellison," Carter held up the file. "It is late. We were cataloging assets for valuation." "For who?" I asked. "And who told you you could measure love?" "Asset is a neutral term," he said. "No," I said. "In my house, asset means people." He smiled like a salesman who knows the door is not locked yet. "With the right offer, you could be free from headaches. You could travel. You could cook," I said. "I could cook." "You can cook anywhere," he said. "That is not true," I said. "Not all kitchens are holy." I took my recipe box, I took my apron, I took the picture of Earl at the griddle on a 30-year anniversary when the mayor brought a proclamation written on paper that smelled like a suit. I put them in a tote. I walked out. Carter said the offer expires Friday at 4. I did not turn. I did not waste one syllable on a man who put a deadline on a life. Mrs. Finch found the listing 2 mornings later. She printed it for me because screens make my eyes see lies. The listing said, "Prime corner lot, tear down, mixed use vision." The listing used a photo of my diner taken from the angle that hid the neon that says hope in the window, where we put it during the war because a boy named Jude asked for a sign that his mom would come home okay. The listing said walkable to nightlife, like we do not get up before dawn. The listing said the seller would consider owner financing. The listing said words that made my knuckles go white on the edge of her desk. "Who is the seller?" I asked.
A holding company, she said. Registered last month to an address correct except one digit. A digit off can be an accident. Or it can be a door. Kick it in, I said. Mrs. Finch grinned like a woman who kept a sledgehammer under her bed. We will start with a letter. The letter worked like a brake on a cart rolling downhill. It did not stop everything. It slowed the lie. While it slowed, I made a plan. It was not a plan written by a woman who wanted to fight. It was a plan written by a woman who wanted to feed her town again. Plan step 1. Food. The town misses food more than it misses me, and that is okay. Plan step 2. People. You cannot reopen a diner alone. You need 2 hands to flip an omelet, 4 feet to cover a breakfast rush, 6 hearts to carry the joy when a waitress knows a regular by pie instead of name. Plan step 3. Paper. Not everything can be fought with a spatula. I put signs up around town the way you put quilts on a line. Honest, in the wind, with clothespins. Ellison's reopening. Soon as God and paper allow. Bring your apron. I got 3 calls. One from a woman who washed dishes at night for beer money and left with rent money because we paid fair. One from a boy I taught to make biscuits in middle school for a bake sale who now had a baby and needed days. One from a man who drove cross-country and wanted to sleep at home for a while. People find their way back when you hang out a sign that says home. We did not have permission yet. We had something better. We had practice. We cooked in my church kitchen on Tuesdays. We fed the senior center on Thursdays. We learned each other's rhythms the way a band tunes ears. I taught the boy how to feel dough instead of measure it. I taught the man that you can flip alone, but you cannot serve alone. I taught the woman my husband's trick for bacon. Start cold, in proud. We made boxes for the sheriff's office and the school. We put a card inside each one. We are still here. The holding company sent a cease and desist when we started selling coffee out of a thermos truck on Saturdays in the parking lot. They said we were interfering with a contract. Mrs. Finch sent a packet back with pages marked in pink and a letter that began with, "Any contract born of fraud is not a mother. It is a thief." That sentence made me love a lawyer like you can love a sunrise. Then came the morning of the sign. I did not know what Leela was doing until I heard Mrs. Green from choir gasp on the sidewalk. "Closed forever," the sign said in big block letters, like a threat carved with a butter knife. The ribbon had not yet curled at the edges. The tape was clean. The gall was fresh. That is when I called the tow. That is when I called the locksmith. That is when I took my ring from my pocket and slid it back on my finger because I am married to this place, even if the person I loved most is gone. Leela arrived just as the locksmith changed the back. Carter arrived with that folder and a voice set to smooth. He said, "I am trying to save you from a bad quarter." I said, "The only quarter I need is the one for the jukebox." He said, "You are making a mistake." I said, "I already made one. I trusted you." He glanced at the step where a kid once fell and cried until a pie appeared and tears turned to laughter, because sugar and kindness can fix small falls. He pointed at the "closed forever" sign like it was a tombstone. He said, "This is reality." I said, "No, this is tape." Then we stood like that. Then the tow driver killed the engine. Then I flipped the sign. I wish the story ended there with a key turning in a town cheering, but we still had paper and people to deal with. A county inspector came with a clipboard and a face that has seen every excuse. He found grease in the trap like I knew he would because we had not run water through the system in 3 months. He found a cracked tile behind the dishwasher. He found the fire extinguisher 2 years out of date because I kept forgetting to get it stamped since Earl was the one who remembered. I said, "Tell me all of it at once so I can fix it all at once." He smiled, which shocked me because some officials forget how. He checked a box that said re-inspection and a day that said Monday. He said, "You are the first person this week who told me to tell it all." Money. You want to know about money? I had some. Enough to float a month and a half if I ate beans and air. Maybe 2 if I let the light bill scare me after dark. The bank told me no because my taxes looked like grief because last year's numbers were black. Carter told me yes with teeth, which means no with strings. I did not take his yes. I went to a credit union where a manager named Terrell wore a tie with a stay in the shape of a state and a smile that looked like a porch. I brought him my cookbook. I brought him the letter from Mrs. Finch. I brought him the list of pre-orders people wrote on a church clipboard. Biscuits X400, pies X57, coffee by the gallon, line items that looked like hope measured in cups. He said, I cannot lend against church promises. Then you looked at the sheet again and said, but I can lend against a community that writes its name next to a number. He gave me half of what I asked. It felt like twice the faith. We cleaned like confession. We scrubbed the griddle until it reflected a woman I recognized. We fixed the tile. We replaced the extinguisher. We hung the new inspection in a plastic sleeve like a diploma. I cried under the hood when the fan came on because a simple motor is proof of how the world keeps moving if you give it power. I brought in the napkin dispenser with the dent Earl made in '97 when he slammed it down laughing at a joke a farmer told about a goat that learned to open a latch. We restocked condiments. The boy from the bake sale labeled squeeze bottles with a marker so neat a teacher would smile. The dishwoman lined up plates like dominoes, straight and sure. The driver hung his jacket on the peg under the clock like men do when they intend to stay through lunch. We set a date. Saturday. We told the town with a flyer we printed on the church's copier when no one was using it so the secretary would not fuss. We said 7 a.m. We knew they would come early because nothing starts on time when coffee is part of the deal. Friday at 4, Carter came with a man in a suit the color of wet concrete and a woman with a camera who pretended she was not filming our faces. He held up a paper with a stamp I recognized from a courthouse. He said, "Injunction." I said, "We will see what it says." Mrs. Finch arrived behind them like a storm with heels. She read. She laughed once, which is scarier than a scream. She said, "This stops nothing but a sale that never belonged to you." She pointed at the paragraph that said the holding company did not hold the thing it claimed. She pointed at the bottom where the judge had written a note in blue ink. Hearing set for Tuesday. Status quo maintained. She looked at me. Status quo means what you have, you keep. Do not sell, do not transfer, do not give a single inch of your name. We are not selling, I said. We are frying. Saturday, the line wrapped the block. People brought lawn chairs like a parade. Some cried, some laughed, some touched the brick like it was a relative back from war. I came at 3:30 a.m. because my hands could not sleep. I rolled dough with a pen that belonged to my mother and her mother and a woman whose name we do not know, but whose hands knew how to turn hunger into something else. I measured with my eyes, which is something only time can teach. I flipped the open sign at 6:59 because 1 minute early is a promise and 1 minute late is a wound. First plate, biscuits and sawmill gravy for Sheriff Moore and the officer who used to bag our groceries before he got a badge. Second plate, short stack for a woman who wore her husband's jacket because he is gone and the jacket does not know. Third plate, 2 eggs, over easy, ham hash browns for a teacher who wrote paid in full on her check 30 years ago and brought us a cake when our boy, my stepson, made Eagle Scout. I salted, I smiled, I cried into the onions once and pretended it was the onions. I heard the bell, I heard laughter, I heard the radio. I heard my husband say from where he is not here, "You did it, Joe. Feed 'em." Mid-morning, the camera woman came back, only this time she bought pancakes and ate them like she remembered she was human. She said, "I should not say this, I should be neutral, but this is the best pancake I ever had." "Neutrality is for fences," I said. "Pick a side, syrup or jam." She laughed. She chose both. Lila did not come that day.
I watched the door and told myself I was not. She did come Sunday. She came alone. She wore flats. She did not wear the armor jewelry. She sat at the counter and put both hands flat, like a child making a print. I poured her coffee without asking because some things a mother does, even when a mother is not wanted. "Mom," she said, and I received it with caution. "I am sorry." "For what?" I asked. "For the tape? For the listing? For calling a life an asset? Or for thinking I would not see?" She breathed like guilt was a heavy coat she hoped to take off. "All of it. I was scared. I do not want to be poor again." I put a plate of eggs in front of her because you cannot apologize on an empty stomach. "You were never poor," I said. "You were young. There's a difference." "You never told me no," she said. "That is not true," I said. "I told you no when you were 11 and wanted to wear lipstick to church." She smiled despite herself. "I remember. I wore it anyway, and you made me eat my words by making me read the bulletin." "You looked like an angel with a mouth full of cherries." She sipped coffee. She looked at my hands. "I will tell Carter to back off. He will not, but I will say it." "You will do more than say it," I said. "You will sign a statement for the judge that you gave Carter paperwork he was not entitled to. You will write dates. You will write times. You will write the truth." "That will ruin him," she said. "No," I said, "that will reveal him." She did not answer. She stared at the refraction of light in her spoon like it was a fortune. She ate the egg so slow I wanted to shake her. She cried once and wiped her cheek with a napkin like a lady. She left the money on the counter and a note under the salt. "I do not deserve you." I slid the note into my pocket with the ring. Tuesday, courthouse. If you have never sat in a courtroom, it is like a diner where no one is allowed to laugh. People sit at tables too small for their fear. People pretend not to look at each other while they look at the person who holds the pen. The man in the suit the color of wet concrete stood at the table with Carter. Mrs. Finch stood at ours. I wore my cardigan like armor, and the necklace Earl gave me the year we paid off the griddle. A judge with hair like snow and eyes like late November called the case. "Your Honor," the suit began, "this is a simple matter of highest and best use." The judge held up a hand. "This is not zoning. This is honesty." He turned to Mrs. Finch. "Tell me why I should not lock everyone in chambers until someone tells me the truth." Mrs. Finch smiled the way a woman smiles right before she lays down a full house. She slid Lila's statement forward. She slid the listing with the wrong digit. She slid the signed paper with the tab I followed like a good mother who trusts her child. She slid a letter from the credit union manager named Terrell, who wrote, with a little syrup at the edge, that the town had pre-ordered the reopening like a wedding cake. Carter tried to object. The judge said, "Sit down." The judge read. He sighed the way a man sighs when he sees weather coming and knows the hay is still in the field. He looked at Lila, who had come in flats in humility. "Is this your signature?" he asked. "Yes," she said. Her voice was not a girl's voice. It was a woman's voice that had run into a wall she built herself. "I am sorry." "Do you know what perjury is?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "It is a lie in a room that demands truth. Do you understand that if I find it here, I will treat it like a fire?" "Yes," he nodded. He turned to Carter. "Sir,
You will find your ethics. If you cannot remember where you left them, the bar committee will draw you a map. He turned to me. Ma'am, feed your town, but do not sign anything without this woman, he said, pointing to Mrs. Finch, for the rest of your days on this earth. I will not, I said. He wrote a final note in blue. He said the words that close one door and open another. Case dismissed with prejudice. Injunction dissolved. Costs to the holding party. Deed remains with Ellison's Diner, LLC. Sole member, Miss Martha Jo Ellison.
I wanted to run out into the hall and scream, but I am a church lady. So I breathed. I looked at Lila. She looked at me. She mouthed, "I'm sorry." I nodded. Forgiveness is not a coupon you hand out at the door. Forgiveness is a recipe that takes time, but you must preheat the oven. I went back to the diner. I turned up the radio. I called the team. I wrote on the chalkboard in big letters that made my hand ache, "Thank you." We cut pie, we sliced ham, we moved chairs. The bell never stopped moving. People cried into napkins and pretended it was the onions. The mayor came with another proclamation, and I made him late like everybody else. A boy from the high school played guitar near the door for tips. A couple got engaged at booth 3 because that is where they ate on their first date, and because nothing says forever like an omelet split in half. The teacher left a note at the register. Grief changes shape. So does joy. You want to know about the stepdaughter. I know you do. People love redemption more than they love biscuits, and that is saying something. Here is what happened. Lila broke off the engagement. She stopped returning Carter's calls. She moved into an apartment over a bookstore and paid in cash she made from a job that made her hands dirty and her heart less so. She came on Thursdays and wiped tables without being asked. She learned to pour coffee without spilling. She asked for a raise after 2 weeks because she likes to test. And I said, no, but I will give you more shifts. She smiled because a fair no is a kind of yes. She took a bus to Nashville to apologize to her brother for the years she made him feel small. He forgave her faster than I would have. Brothers do that sometimes. We put a new sign in the window. Not open, not hope. We kept those. We added one more that says, respect. Hand-painted by a woman from choir whose cursive makes angels jealous. We hung it crooked on purpose. We said we would fix it when we had time. We never had time. That is how you know something is alive. I started a wall in the hallway, not for signatures, for recipes. Bring one, put your name, tell a story. The first card came from Sheriff Moore. It was his grandmother's pickle recipe. The second came from Mrs. Green. It was pound cake from a woman born the year women got the right to vote. The third came from a girl with blue hair who never smiled until the day she hung her mother's gumbo and said the words I did not think I would ever hear in this county. This diner saved my life. The health inspector came back unannounced, the way they are supposed to. He found a crumb under the toaster and smiled at me because he knew I saw it too. He checked the box that says, satisfactory. He wrote a note in the margin, best pancakes in the county, off the record. I taped that to the fridge. I got an envelope from the courthouse with a check inside. Costs to the holding party, it said. The number made me breathe out in a way that sounded like a laugh. I took that check to the credit union. Terrell stamped it and winked. We paid the loan faster than any schedule. We bought a new griddle. We bought a neon repair for the E in Ellison's because it kept flickering like a heart with a hiccup. We had a ceremony where we turned it on and the town clapped like I married the building. If you want a villain, you can have one in Carter. But villains are boring if you make them the point. The point is this: a woman can decide not to be erased. A town can decide what it wants to be when it grows up. A diner can be more than food. A recipe can be more than flour and fat. A recipe can be a contract between generations. I will feed you. You will remember me. We will belong to each other without chains.
1 year later, we held a homecoming. We invited anyone who ever worked a shift. We invited tractor dealers and librarians and a drummer who left for Nashville and came back with a beard and a story. We put up photos. We laid out pies like a parade. We gave Leela the first slice because a first slice is not a reward. It is a promise. She cried. I cried. The boy with the guitar played a song he wrote for Earl called Short Order King. And it is not a great song, but it is a true one, and I will take true over great until the Lord calls me home. A woman from the paper asked me to say what the diner means in one sentence. Journalists love one sentence the way bakers love one bowl. I said, "This place makes room." She said, "Room for what?" I said, "For people to be better than they were yesterday." I keep the closed forever sign in the office, not as a trophy, as a reminder. Nothing is forever. Not grief, not fear, not even triumph. You get up tomorrow and fry the bacon. You wipe the counter. You count the change. You forgive a little. You ask for forgiveness a little. You do not sign papers you have not read. You do not let anyone tell you that your life is an asset to be maximized. You do not let anyone call your table a concept. You look at your hands. You see scars. You see strength. You say thank you before the coffee hits the cup. Sometimes just before dawn, I walk to the back door with the trash. I stop by the alley where cats think they live. I look at the sky. I tell Earl the specials. I tell him who came in. I tell him the stepdaughter's trying, which is all any of us can do. I tell him the boy learned to make biscuits without looking, which is how you know a skill has moved from your hands into your bones. I tell him the town is still hungry. He answers in the only language the living and the gone both speak. Silence that feels like love. If you are listening in a city I will never see, if you are listening in a county that looks like mine but has a different name, I want you to know you have a counter somewhere. It may not be a diner. It may be a porch. It may be a pew. It may be a sewing table. Sit there. Put your hands on wood that has held somebody's elbows before yours. Ask for coffee. Tell the truth. If somebody keeps closed forever on your life, find the corner. Peel. Flip the sign. The day we hung the respect sign, a little girl asked me what the word means. I said, it means we look each other in the eyes and see a person, not a price. She nodded like a child who just learned a secret. She drew the word in crayon on a napkin and stuck it under the sugar. I left it there all day. People read it like a prayer. This is the part where I say thank you for listening. This is the part where I ask you where you are from, because I like to imagine my voice traveling across places with names like song. This is the part where I tell you 2 more stories are waiting at the end, because there are always more stories when there is more life. This is the part where I remind you that tips pay for college applications and new shoes. This is the part where I say subscribe if you want seconds.
But before all that, this is the part where I pour one last cup and put it in front of you without asking how you take it, because some kindness does not need details. My name is Martha Jo Ellison. I am 62. I am a widow. I am a woman who bought back her life and turned on the sign. The bell over the door is ringing. That sound is hope. Come in. Sit down. Breakfast is ready. I wake at 4. I tie my apron. I open the back door to let out night and let in morning. I check the griddle with a quick hand the way a mother checks a child's forehead. Warm. Good. I sift flour. I measure salt and baking powder by feel because a teaspoon is a good servant and a bad master. I cut shortening with a pastry blender that was my mother's and her mother's. I pour buttermilk until the bowl looks right. I pat the dough. I fold it like a letter. I cut circles with the rim of a glass because I like the sound it makes. I place biscuits close enough to help each other rise. I brush the tops with cream. I slide the tray into heat. A man takes the corner booth and pretends he is not crying. I give him coffee and do not ask why. A woman orders pie at 7:10 a.m. and says she did not sleep. I give her 2 forks and she eats with both hands like she is rowing a boat away from something. The dishwasher sings gospel under his breath. The line cook stacks plates like he is building a wall that will hold. The server in the blue apron remembers who takes sweetener and who takes a lie about how this is decaf. The bell rings. The bell rings again. At 10, the stepdaughter returns with a paper in her hand and courage she borrowed from somewhere. She hands me the paper. It is from an accountant who says the holding company is closing. The bottom says reconciliation. She says the word like it is hard conduit she is not sure she likes. I take the paper. I do not hug her. I do not trust yet. I pour coffee. That is the hug we give here. In the afternoon, a group of veterans takes table 6. They talk about everything except the thing. They pay for a young couple without saying who did it because charity is quieter than noise. A high school girl studies for a test at the counter and eats 1 fry every 5 minutes like it is precious. I tell her the fries are not precious. She says her mother is saving. I say eat. She eats. She passes the test. She comes back with the form and asks me to sign as a reference. I sign with the same pen I used to sign the deed, and my hand shakes more for her than it did for me.
At dusk, when the diner smells like coffee and onions and a dozen stories, a man in a hard hat fixes the respect sign so it hangs straight. I thought I did not want it straight, but when he steps back and we all look, the word sits in the window like a truth we finally told the right way. He does not let me pay. He says, "You fed my mother the week my father left. This is me paying my tab." The camera woman comes again. She sits in the last booth with a notebook she does not use. She listens. She eats pie. She asks me for the recipe. And I say yes, because recipes are meant to travel. She asks me what I would say to my younger self. I say, read the papers, keep the recipes, love the man, save more, spend enough, eat cake when someone offers, eat cake when no one offers. Do not apologize for wanting to keep the thing you built. Night. We mop, we count, we scrape the grill, we take out the trash, we put chairs up. The dishwasher turns off the radio. The line cook wipes the prep table in straight lines that make me proud. The server rubs her feet and laughs. We lock the door. We stand in the lot under the neon that smells like warm dust. We do not want to leave because leaving a good day is like walking away from a song right before the last note resolves. We say see you in the morning like a blessing. On the anniversary of the day I flipped the sign, we hold a free breakfast for anyone who wants it. No questions, no check. People who could pay, bring cash and leave it under the sugar. People who could not, leave nothing and take a plate.
A little boy asks me if he can help. I hand him a dish towel and tell him to wipe the bottom shelves. He does it with the concentration only kids and surgeons have. I pay him with a biscuit and a story about Earl. He eats the biscuit and asks for the story again. That is how Laura lives.
At noon that day, the pastor from the church 2 streets over says a prayer in the parking lot. He thanks God for butter and griddles and second chances. He thanks God for women who do not give up. He thanks God for stepdaughters who learn to clean sugar shakers with their whole heart. We say amen. The sky does not split. The ground does not shake. A truck honks. A woman laughs. Life resumes, which is the miracle. You kept listening this long, so I will tell you one more secret. On the very first day we ever opened the diner, before the sign, before the first order, before the first complaint about the coffee being too weak, Earl leaned across the counter and whispered, "The trick is to love them first." I said, "What if they do not love you back?" He said, "That is not the point." I forgot that for a while when he died. I remembered when I flipped the sign. If you are still here, thank you. Tell me your town in the comments. Tell me your counter. Tell me the recipe card with the corner torn. Tell me the name you write at the top when you make something that makes more than food. If you feel like it, press the button that puts a few dollars in the tip jar so we can keep the lights on and the coffee hot for the next story. On your screen, you can see 2 more stories I think you'll like. One involves a key that did not fit until it did. One involves a deed that had a name erased and then written back in with a hand that would not shake. I am Martha Joe. I am at the grill. The bell is ringing. The door is open. Come in. Sit. Whatever's heavy, set it down. Breakfast is ready.